groups and teams. And probably the thing that you'll be doing most at work is working in some form of a group. We have come to the conclusion that teams are good, but they require a lot of work in order to put them together, and they go through some stumbles as they move along. We talked about the 5 stages, and we've talked about this mysterious midpoint transition in terms of trying to get the job done. So what is the takeaway for managers or people who are designing organizations? Well, the takeaway is you really need to work at creating an effective team. And what are some of the best things that we should be aware of in order to actually do that? Well, the first thing is there's lots of theories on how to make good teams, but usually those theories tend to break down into these 4 basic catch-alls, okay? The first one is that you have to have enough resources to get the job done. If you try to get a team to do something and they don't have the tools to do it, it makes it very difficult to be successful. So resources and what I call other contextual influences, having the right people and the right time and the right effort. A bunch of rights need to be in place. And that's what we mean by contextual influences. If we're trying to, for example, our job is to get a project done, well, is there lots of other projects that need to be done at the same time by the various members? That's going to have an impact on our ability to get this one done, right? And we also look at the team composition. Do we have people with the right skills? Is everyone of a marketing focus, or is everyone of finance focus? What we really need is people who have a mix of focuses. We need people who are finance, people who are math, people who are marketing, this sort of thing, in order to make this work. We need to make sure we have the right people who bring the right skills. And that's one of the biggest tricks in forming a team in order to achieve something, is getting all those right skill sets together. We also got to think about the work design. Various things can go wrong if the timing is not right. So is our schedule decent? Is a week long enough to get a project done, or is it really going to take longer than that? Or is it too long? Is the schedule 2 months when really it's only going to take a week? So we push it off, and it leads to some issues there. So the work design and how far apart we are, even like this here, can we do it virtually? Do we need to get together? Is it something that requires us to be physically present? And we also think about some of the team processes, which really flows into work design. And these are the things that teams need to do in order to make things happen. And do they have the ability to do those, or do they actually do those things? So that was the broad concept, okay? Now I just wanted to take those and kind of narrow them a little more, put a finer point on them, okay? So if we could break those 4 points down into boxes, and here they are in boxes, and we'll talk about context first. And what exactly are some of the context things? And I mentioned adequate resources, making sure that we got enough of the right skills, the right leadership. Who's leading this? Who's putting this together? And if this is a work team, there is a leader in this. Is the leader a good leader? Is the leader a poor leader? Does the leader have a clear vision of what needs to be done? Can the leader communicate it? Is there a climate of trust? Do everyone, get along, or do they not get along? If they don't get along, that's going to have trouble in order to achieve the goal. Is there some sort of a measure of how well we did, a performance evaluation? If people are just slack and they don't want to do anything, are those people accountable for that? Or do the rest have to pick up the slack for them? And the same thing to people who work really hard, is there some reward in it for them? Is your pay going to be higher because you put in more effort? So context is very important with regards to the team effectiveness. And when you're designing a team, you got to think about what are some of the contextual issues that I need to worry about in order to move this forward. We also look at the work design. We think, okay, how do we design the tasks, or do we have a good plan? Effectively, do we have a good plan? And in terms of the plan, okay, let's think about all the team members in order to initiate this plan. Do they have the skills and the ability to work at this? Do someone need to hold their hand with it? Are they independent? Do they have the power, the autonomy to make their own decisions on how they go about doing it? Do they have the right mix of skills? You know, do you have the accounting person, the marketing person, the engineering person in order to build this thing? Because if they're all accountants and they don't know anything about engineering, that's going to be a problem. Another thing is task identity. Can these people who are in the team identify with it? Do they like what they're doing? You know, if they're tasked with let's assume that the team is tasked with designing a New Year's party. So they're the party planners and they're going to design a party for New Year's. Can they relate to that? Are they interested in forming a New Year's party or getting a New Year's party organized? If they're not, again, probability of success is not that great. So task identity is, can the members relate to what they're doing? Is it something that they value and think is worth doing? And task significance, very same thing. Is it important enough relative to all the other things they need to do, or does this get shoved to the back? The third element looks at composition. Who's in the team? If we look at the team members, do they have the right skills? What's their personalities like? Do they work well together? Are they people that don't work well with anyone? Do they have clearly defined roles? Your job is this, my job is that. So I'm clear on because again, we talked about the storming stage. I'm not clear on my role. You're not clear on your role. I end up doing some of the things you want to do. You get upset with me. You know, this idea of role ambiguity is the term that's used. If we're not clear on what our roles are, it makes it difficult. Diversity. Team members are all different. Do they come from different perspectives? Do they work well together? Are they so different people? Now, the thing is with diversity is that we need the differences in order to be able to draw upon people's different skills. You know, if we're all men, for example, men are going to look at things very differently than women. And the decisions that the men make is probably not as good as if they had decisions that involve women as well. So diversity means that you're getting a broader perspective. And diversity is good, but it takes longer to get that type of team set up. It just, because they're so different, the storming stage will probably be a longer stage. But once they get rolling, it's great. The size of the team, is it a reasonable size? Is it just too big? You remember, you try to have a team with 1,000 members. It doesn't make any sense, right? So you need to keep your membership down to 6 or 8 people to get it done. And the members' performance, do they actually do the work, or are they just sitting there? And that's going to have a difference on the value of the team and the perceived amount of teamwork that goes into play. And finally, we got this issue of process. You know, is everybody clear on what the process to achieve the goal is? Do we have a common purpose? Is it clear? And a lot of teams, you know, they used to do, I don't know if they do it anymore. At Walmart, they do the Walmart chant. Yay, yay, in the morning, everyone gets together and has the Walmart chant. That's designed to build purpose. If you think about the military are very good at that, at building a team. What you need to do in the military, for example, is you need to take a soldier, a young man usually, but there's women involved as well now too. But you have to take a young person and make them start thinking as a group as opposed to an individual. That kind of runs counter in the military because, you know, young people are very self-centered, self-focused. And what you got to do is kind of wash that all away and make them think of the group. So organizations like the Army, or in the United States, the U.S. Marines, you know, which is really a good example, a very solid team of very specialized warriors. Those are young men normally, and getting those young men to think of common purpose is a big job. So what they do in the military, and all militaries, the Marines in particular, is they shave your head and they give you a standard uniform. That's purposeful. It takes away the individual and makes you start to think like a group. It's purposely done like that in order to give you a common purpose. And when you wear that flag or you wear the badge, that signifies a common purpose. Process, you need specific goals. Here's what we need to do. Everybody needs to know what we need to do. Team efficacy. Do we have a good sense of what we are? Efficacy meaning, you know, the value that we put into something. Is there, for example, mental models? Do we have processes for making decisions in place? You know, for example, what we're going to do is we're going to think about it, and everyone's going to write down their suggestion, and we're going to review the suggestions. We're going to vote on it. That's an example of that type of thing. Managed level of conflict. That seemed contrarian, but normally a certain degree of conflict is good. In a team, if you don't have people who disagree, what happens is the team gets what's called groupthink. In other words, they don't critically evaluate each other's thoughts. And because the norming stage is just, we all think the same. We're one. So we need to be able to kind of have a certain level of degree of conflict that gets people to think outside the box and in different ways, but not to the point that it causes grief. And that's a big challenge. And finally, we've got this issue of accountability. If I'm going to make a decision, I need to be accountable for that decision. So this graphic right here kind of summarizes some of the key things that managers need to be aware of whenever they form up teams. So, and these slides here just kind of elaborate on what I just said. The context of teams require a great deal of maintenance to function properly. They need management support as well as organizational structure to support the team. 4 contextual factors appear most significant related to team performance are adequate resources, effective leadership, a climate of trust, and performance evaluation and reward system. In terms of adequate resources, which is a key one, all work teams rely on resources outside the team to sustain them. The scarcity of resources directly reduces the ability of the team to do the job. You've got no money. If you're building a house, no one's supplying you with any wood or lumber, it makes it very hard to do it. As one set of research concluded after looking at 13 factors potentially relating to team performance, perhaps one of the most important characteristics of effective work group is the support the group receives from the organization. Support includes technology, adequate staffing, administrative assistance, encouragement, and timely information. Teams must receive necessary support from management and larger organization if they're going to succeed. This is where management buy-in is so important. It's one thing for a company to say, yeah, we're going to host a New Year's party, but if there's no real support for it by management in terms of real honest goods and support, it's probably not going to succeed. We also look at things like leadership structure in terms of the context. What kind of leadership? Well, leadership plays a critical role. It's very important. We think of the role of team leader involves, looking at multi-team systems in which different teams need to be coordinated. How do we coordinate our teams? Create real time rather than a team in name only. So what kind of, our team has a specific reason to exist. And if it doesn't have a specific reason to exist, it's like having a social committee, but we don't have any socials. Well, what's the point of the team? Set clear and meaningful direction for your team's work. Make sure the team structure will support working effectively. Ensure the team operates with supportive organizational context. Provide expert coaching. Team members must agree on who's to do what and ensure that all members contribute equally to shared workload. Team needs to determine how schedules will be set, what skills need to be developed, how the team will resolve conflicts, and how the team will make and modify decisions. And we have to agree on specifics of work and how they fit together in order to integrate skills. So all these things are important from a leadership point of view. You need to have all of these factors in place in order to make the team work. Another critical factor in the context is the climate of trust. You can't believe how powerful this is. Members of effective teams must trust one another. If they don't trust one another, it's going to have a big impact. For team members to achieve a climate of trust, they must feel that the team is capable of getting the job done. And the team will not harm an individual or his or her interests. So, if everyone's afraid, if, for example, team members are afraid to speak out, we talked about this idea of level of conflict. But let's assume you're in a team, but one member is afraid to speak out because someone will ridicule or whatever. That's not a climate of trust. And what's going to happen there is that the team will not necessarily work well. Back in 1986, I remember it well. I was in the Thompson Student Center at the time. The Space Shuttle Challenger blew up 73 seconds into its launch, and the 7 members were killed. Well, you know, one of the things that the report that was done after that on that accident found is that there wasn't a high climate of trust within NASA. You know, some people did not want to launch the shuttle on that. It was the 20th of January, so it was not too, you know, pretty close to the date of it here now. It was a cold day, and people from one group said, no, we should not launch because the thing, the seals inside of the rockets could be damaged with the weather. And sure enough, that happened. But they were ignored by the other team members. And they found that NASA just did not have a good system for allowing people to exercise their concerns without being ridiculed. And this issue of trust was a real problem inside of NASA, and there was a lot of work done to resolve that. Team members are more likely to take risks and expose vulnerabilities if they believe they can trust one another. And that was the theme that came out of that report into the Challenger explosion. So, you know, the following actions in order of importance help build one's trustworthiness: integrity, honesty and truthfulness is really all that means, and competence, you know how to do your job, you have the technical skills and the interpersonal knowledge. Consistency, being reliable. Loyalty, willing to protect and stand up for others. And openness, willingness to share ideas. So all that is very important in the climate of trust. Again, this context one is critically important. So this little summary is in your textbook here, and I just copied it and put it here. This is really all of those things all put into a nice little graphic there, which says, okay, look, you know, good teams share these basic dozen elements. Clear purpose. We know what we're doing. We know why we exist. There's nothing worse than a team that has no real clear idea of why it exists. There's a certain degree of informality. Where people can be relaxed inside the team, so they don't mind sharing their viewpoints. Participation. Everyone has to, you know, do their share and be encouraged to participate. Listening. Team has to be open to ideas. Civilized disagreement. This is one of the key things that probably someone should speak to people like Donald Trump on. You know, it's fine to have disagreement. Disagreement is understandable, but it needs to be civilized. Consensus decisions, and this is a real challenge. A lot of the meetings I'm in, you know, reaching a consensus, in other words, getting everyone basically to agree to one course of action, that's hard to do, and it takes a certain skill in order to get, you know, to look at how can we find a way that suits all of us. Open communication, that's certainly one way to help, you know, develop a better team. Clear rules and work assignments. People got to know what their jobs are. Shared leadership. Everybody's responsible for success. Good external relations. How do we deal with the outsiders of the organization? And do we feel positive about it? Are we looked at positively? Style diversity. Not everyone thinks the same. This idea of groupthink is a problem. As I say, you need different members with different ideas. And some ability to do some self-assessment, which the team stops to examine, you know, what it's doing and if it's doing it well. So some key teamwork skills that you want to bring to things as an individual is, you know, problem solving. That's a big one. You know, assist the team in arriving at common understanding of the situation of problems, determines the important elements. Organizing team performance, you know, help teams establish specific, challenging, acceptable team goals. Again, this is all to do with goal setting. Positive team environment. Assists in creating and reinforces norms of tolerance, respect, and excellence. Recognizes and praises the team for their efforts. Facilitates and manages task conflict. Okay, encourages desirable and discourages undesirable team conflict. Recognizes that the type and source of conflict confronting the team and implements the appropriate resolutionary strategy. The idea of win-win is critical there. And promotes perspective, defends certain preferences, argues for particular points of view, and withstands pressure to change position for another that is not supported by logical or knowledgeable arguments. So these are some of the key findings. So we've got this We know what needs to be done in order to make a team work well. What happens if it works well? What happens if it don't? So we're looking at the structure here. So group structure really refers to the characteristics of a good, stable social organization. Why and how is the group put together? So we look at what is it that makes a difference? Well, two of the ones that have come up all the time, and we've already mentioned this, is the size of the group and the diversity of the group. The size of the group makes a big difference. And groups could be ranging anywhere from 2 to 200 people. Okay, so we've got groups, and once groups become so big, nobody knows one another anymore, and you lose some of the benefit of the team. So we need a group that has a proper size. Proper size is really dependent on the organization. So in general, members of larger groups report less satisfaction with group membership than those who find themselves in smaller groups. So increased potential for conflict reduces the opportunity for participation. Inhibition, people are afraid to speak, and the inability to identify who contributes to the group are among the reasons for this phenomenon. So we need to be careful when we set up a group or a team, in the case of a particular focused group, that we don't have too many numbers. We need enough people to do the job so that we don't strangle people with too much work, but we need just that right mix. So we got to think about how big a size, and is the size too big? And in terms of the actual performance, different types of tasks are performed by groups where performance could depend on the type of task that's being involved. Now, if you think about type of task, you got to think now, is this a task where what I do affects you? If I'm slow, will it slow you down? Right? These are the types of things that we have to worry about with regards to our task. And effectively, we can think about tasks in terms of two types. There's two types of tasks. There's what's called disjunctive and conjunctive tasks. Disjunctive tasks are tasks in which the performance is dependent on the performance of the best group member. So as the group gets larger, performance may also decrease as a function of process losses. So it's just too many people bumping into one another, these sorts of things. Process losses are group performance difficulties stemming from problems of motivating and coordinating large groups. So it is really a disjunctive task. It says, okay, what's our best group member? That's the person that's going to affect the group. Conjunctive tasks are types of tasks in which the group performance is limited by performance of the poorest group member, the weakest link. Okay, group performance on conjunctive tasks decreases as the size increases. Okay, so if we think of this in terms of sports, if we're playing hockey, the team, has a captain, let's say Wayne Gretzky or someone like that, and that can really buoy up the group. So hockey is very much a disjunctive task. Everybody can work together to achieve it, and having a real strong player helps build it up. An assembly line, on the other hand, we worked on an assembly line where we had to do something and then do something else by someone else, and someone else going to do something based on that. That's what's called a conjunctive task. It's like a serial. You need to do something first, and then I need to do something. So in sports, that would be a relay race, where all of us are in the relay race, and I'm the slowest one. In fact, I'm crawling. And you're thinking to yourself, that's going to affect our overall time because I'm crawling. You guys ran really fast. I crawled. So you're dependent on me, but I'm going to have the ability to slow you all down because of that. So we got to consider what type of task is this, and how big a size do we need? Because if we get too big, we're going to run into problems. Diversity is another big thing that comes in play in terms of group structure. And I already mentioned that diversity is good to a point. You want people to have different perspectives, okay? That's important. You don't want the perspectives, though, to be so different that they can't get along. So diverse groups have a more difficult time in getting together in terms of that forming, storming, and norming stage. That's a little bit more challenging because they have difficulty communicating or not cohesive, and it takes longer. But once they get together, the advantages of diversity rise to the top. People get to know one another, they can start working together. And the fact that they're a little bit different means that they can actually do better. So once developed, diversity has little impact on performance, and sometimes performance is better if the tasks require creativity and problem solving. So this idea of diversity could be a good thing. We can look too at some of the impediments to team effectiveness. What gets in the way? There's lots of things that get in the way, and these are typical issues in the work environment. Okay, what causes problems with a team? Well, people refuse to share. They don't share their energy, don't share their resources, and they don't share their ideas and issues. So they basically keep it to themselves. And then we got the issue of depending too much on the leader. Everyone is a follower as opposed to a leader. So as a result, if the leader, if we think about this disjunctive task, if the leader doesn't do a good job, everything else, if one jumped off the cliff, would everyone jump off the cliff? That type of thing. Hiding conflict. That is, again, oftentimes whenever there's lack of trust or lack of good communications, that's normally what happens. Failure to resolve conflicts. Conflicts are common. Question is, do they get resolved? And good organizations work hard to resolve them. And so when subgroups form, they put their needs ahead of the whole group. So this happens sometimes too when you have cliques within your organization. And these subgroups could be informal groups that get together and say, well, we're not going to work with them. We don't like working with them. And that could have an effect on the organization as a whole. So the final thing today is I want to look at this issue of norms, okay? And group norms are what comes of all of that. The third stage is forming, storming, and norming. And norm is a fancy word for normals. It is the thing that we accept as what is regular or acceptable in a group. So norms develop and provide this regularity and predictability to behavior. We have norms in society, right? We don't go outdoors and shooting off guns in the middle of town. Okay, so these norms are developed and they're designed to regulate individual behaviors, and they keep everyone within all the balls on the pool table. That's the idea of it. It's designed. The norms are designed to create boundaries for what is acceptable and what's unacceptable. So most individuals will comply with the norms, provided they're not too restrictive. Most will, but every once in a while, someone's going to go outside the norm, and that's going to have a significant impact on the organization. So we have to think, are the norms too restrictive? Are the norms shared? Do people agree with the norms? And do the norms promote performance as opposed to work against it? Let's look at some typical norms. What are typical norms in an organization? You could think that, here's just three of the common ones. Norms. We think about dress norms. Social norms frequently dictate the type of clothing people wear. Okay, so if I think about workplaces, shirt and tie, not shirt and tie, T-shirts, where is the norm there? What is the norm? And I think in most organizations you go into, if you just take a look around and see what people are wearing, you'll find that generally they're wearing basically the same thing. Reward allocation norms. That's like in terms of pay. There's 4 basic norms that might dictate rewards, such as pay, promotions, and informal favors can allocate. And these 4 norms are known as equity, equality, reciprocity, and social responsibility. Every group has these basic norms, and equity means that you're treated fairly. Doesn't mean everyone's treated the same. It means that everyone's treated fairly. Do you feel you're treated fairly? So people will want equity in their group. They want to be treated fairly. The other thing is equality. Now, that don't mean necessarily that everyone's going to be treated equally. It just means that you need to feel as if everyone has the same opportunity. So men and women, tall people, short people, people of different ethnic backgrounds, you would want to consider the fact that equality exists in an organization if everyone has an equal chance. Reciprocity is a fancy word for I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. If you work hard, do you get rewarded for working hard? If you are not working so hard, do you not get rewarded? Okay, so reciprocity is just I'll do this for you if you do that for me. If you got a feeling of reciprocity, it means that you're feeling like you're getting paid the right amount of money for the work you do. You don't feel like you've been slighted or gypped. And social responsibility, and that is looking at the group as a whole. Do you feel as if you're doing the things that are right? It's more of an ethical thing. Do you have, you look after the people that you're with and make sure that you're helping them as opposed to hindering them. So those norms exist in our society, and they certainly exist within groups as well. We also have what's called performance norms, and performance norms deal with things like getting the work done. The performance of an organization member might be as much a function of social expectation as their inherent ability, personal motivation, or the technology. The performance norm in organizations, this is something you're going to learn real fast when you work in an organization. I remember working with a guy who said, do your job, but don't do too much of it. The performance norm in a lot of organizations are set by the group. And people who come into the organization need to figure out what the performance norm is. Should I work really hard? Is that what the expectation is? Should I work moderately hard, or should I not work very hard at all? Performance norms are not written down anywhere, but you'll learn pretty quick in the organization what's expected. And if you break those norms, meaning you work too hard, you work too little, you won't be long figure out that you're either a rate buster or a slacker. So you need to consider what are the performance norms in the organization and make them clear to everyone to say we expect. So usually a clear set of goals is important there in order to figure out the we expect.